done on the border.
Well, a heck of a morning here in America's newsroom. That was the president just officially declaring a national emergency to secure funding for the border wall.
Yeah, we've been watching this debate now play out for some time now. I guess really you go back 3 years, right, when the candidacy first began. But the government shutdown that lasted for 35 days, we're not going to revisit that. The spending bill was signed, passed by Congress yesterday. The president indicates that he'll sign that now. And then we'll see, the next wrinkle in the story. But it looks like more money can go to border security, while the rest of it's going to be tied up before a judge of some sort very soon.
That was quite a morning. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. It's Friday, by the way. Happy weekend to you, Bill Hemmer. Enjoy it, everybody. Thanks for joining us here at America's Newsroom. We'll see you back here Monday morning, 9 to noon. Outnumbered starts right now. Fox News alert, new reaction pouring in after President Trump declares a national emergency to secure funds to build a border wall, and Democrats are promising a fight. The president announcing his decision from the Rose Garden of the White House. He will sign a bipartisan compromise bill to secure the border and fund the government, but also says he must go even further. This is Outnumbered, and I'm Melissa Francis. Here today is the host of the Evening Edit on the Fox Business Network, Elizabeth McDonald, Fox News contributor Lisa Booth, Fox News contributor Jessica Charloff, and joining us on the couch, co-host of Fox and Friends, Fox News radio host, and host of What Makes America Great on the Fox Nation app, Brian Kilmeade. There was a lot more to your introduction, but I cut it off.
We have to get to the topic.
Radio. There's not enough time.
We can't forget the radio show.
All right, let's get right to it. The White House releasing this picture of President Trump signing the national emergency declaration today. The president using his executive powers to obtain billions for construction of a border wall, calling it an urgent problem that needs to finally be addressed. The top Democratic leaders in Congress releasing a statement calling this a, quote, power grab and vowing to fight it in the courts. The move will allow the president to continue to fight for the wall while averting another partial government shutdown that would have been triggered at midnight tonight. Watch this.
We're going to be signing today and registering national emergency because we have an invasion of drugs, invasion of gangs, invasion of people, and it's unacceptable. And by signing the national emergency, something signed many times by other presidents, nobody's done the job that we've ever done. I mean, nobody's done the job that we've done on the border.
A Fox News poll finding 56% oppose President Trump bypassing Congress and declaring an emergency to build the wall, with 38% in favor. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is live on Capitol Hill with the latest. Mike.
Melissa, good afternoon. White House officials tell Fox News here is how they intend to round up money to build President Trump's border barricade. $1.375 billion in the appropriations bill that Congress just passed. $600 million for the Treasury Department forfeiture fund, $2.5 billion from the Defense Department in terms of reprogramming, and $3.5 billion from the military construction budget. President Trump says he recognizes this action will get tied up in the courts.
We'll have a national emergency, and we will then be sued, and they will sue us in the Ninth Circuit, even though it shouldn't be there, and we will possibly get a bad ruling, and then we'll get another bad ruling, and then we'll end up in the Supreme Court, and hopefully we'll get a fair shake, and we'll win in the Supreme Court. Just like the ban, they sued us in the Ninth Circuit, and we lost, and then we lost in the appellate division, and then we went to the Supreme Court, and we won.
A Republican senator who helped negotiate the appropriations package isn't sold on this maneuver.
I've been very clear on my concerns about the president declaring this as an emergency in ways that haven't been done before, and that's still my view. But let's see exactly what he tries to do and how he tries to do it, and then we'll see where we go from there.
But Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he will support this national emergency, and some of President Trump's closest allies here, like South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, says he understands the president's frustration.
We had these 3 weeks to see if we could find a compromise. My hope was that we could give the president his budget number and do something about TPS and DACA, and that ship never appeared, and that was very disappointing. So if you can send troops to the border, which Obama did, Bush did, Trump's done, why can't they erect barriers while they're there? I think he has all the legal authority in the world to do this, and I will stand behind it.
Others suggest lawmakers will regret this precedent.
This is, no one is putting this in the column of national emergencies. And if that were to happen, it would be, I think, a very serious mistake. It would be opening the doors for future presidents to come in and willy-nilly declare national emergencies just because their priority project was not approved.
In fact, some suggest a future Democratic president could declare a national emergency on health care, climate change, or gun violence. Melissa?
All right, Mike Emanuel, thank you so much for that. Brian, I want to start with you because to be clear, the White House laid out these various pots of money that they're looking to for the wall. There's the $1.375 billion from this deal, which has a lot of handcuffs on it. There's $2.5 billion from the Pentagon's Drug Interdiction Initiative, $600 million from the Treasury Drug Forfeiture Program. It is only that $3.5 billion from the Pentagon's Military Construction Fund. That's the only piece of this, up to 8, I think is the total. That's the only piece that comes from declaring this national emergency. Was it necessary?
Well, they were putting this all together for the last 3 months. They didn't know what was going to happen, but you have to understand one thing. The president's not just trying to fulfill a campaign promise. He actually believes it is an emergency. You could put sodium pentothal, give him that. He'd say the same thing. Put him a lie detector test, it would come out the same way. So he thoroughly believes it. And he deals with law enforcement in coming to that conclusion. If you've seen the quotes over the last, and the sound bites over the last few days, is these people are saying they don't care about politics. They're saying we need help. We don't have enough money, and we've got to get people for Border Patrol. We need the barrier. It absolutely is effective. And the reason why more drug comes through the ports is because that's where they have the most sensors and monitors. That's why they're picking up most of it. So to me, there's been 58 times this has been used for probably presidents since Jimmy Carter. This is a time in which, yeah, we're going to test the limitations of the power of the president. Yeah. I can understand the reservations. The one thing they told me is the gun analogy doesn't work because that's a Second Amendment. That's a right. Okay. But when you talk about other areas, maybe down the pike, they'll be declared emergency. Maybe if they are an emergency, they should be declared this way because Congress can't do anything effectively.
EMAC, here's the other side. So in the other cases where you declared emergency, you weren't reappropriating funds from somewhere else, that this does violate the Constitution because Congress has the power of the purse. The president does not. That's the argument.
Yeah, that is the argument. That's why 5 Republicans oppose it, including Susan Collins, I think Tom Tillis, and Marco Rubio. Here's the thing. 1993, SCOTUS decision said, yes, the president has the statutory authority to do this, to use reprogrammed money. You see it in the 76 Emergencies Act. It says, you know, he does have the power without regard to any other provision to do this. And the GAO supports this. The 2006 Secure Fence Act supports it. There's language existing that he can do this. You know, we had Representative Mo Brooks saying, how many more dead Americans do you need for this to be declared a national emergency? Absolutely. We had it for swine flu, Sierra Leone diamonds. We know that President Obama got money for insurers for Obamacare. So, you know,
was sued and lost. This
will be a war of attrition in the courts, though. You could see that happening. And maybe it was too broad and deferential, the 76 Emergencies Act, for the president's power. But, you know, so the issue remains, is it a crisis? Yes. Are people being harmed by it? Are Americans being harmed by it? Yes. So I think that's where the focus of the argument should go.
The president denies that this is creating a precedent. Let's listen to his words. And Jessica, I'll get your response. Go ahead.
The people that say we create precedent, well, what do you have, 56 or a lot of times? Well, that's creating precedent. And many of those are far less important than having a border. You don't have a border, you don't have a country.
Lindsey Graham made the point, too, that Democrats could have made a deal if they wanted to trade for DACA. And it has been interesting to me in the past couple of weeks. You haven't heard Democrats say word one about helping people who are trying to get permanent status here. They could have traded for that.
That's because they believe that they can get a clean bill there. And Nancy Pelosi has said that since the beginning that she wants a clean bill for dreamers here and that we're going to be looking at comprehensive immigration reform. You hear the new candidates for president talking about that, like Amy Klobuchar did with Brett Baier. I think there's a distinction to be made here between an emergency and having a wall. And there are border agents and people who work down there who certainly say that a border wall would help us. There are also people like Congressman Will Hurd, who represents 42% of the space there, who says we don't need a wall. And what the president is doing is transferring the language to emergency, which may just be, I believe in this thing. And I agree with you, Brian, he believes in his heart that this is true. But for you to say that he's been president over 2 years now, he had control of both houses and didn't get anything done for this wall that he has been saying has been an emergency since the beginning, since he came down that golden escalator and changed all of our lives, seems ridiculous and patently false. Well, if it's an emergency, it should have been declared an emergency years ago. The numbers have not changed. Actually, when you look at the statistics going back over the last 20 years, our situation with illegal immigration has actually gotten dramatically better.
If you were to say that to an Angel family, they would say, yeah, it's a crisis.
Well, I understand that, but tragedy does not mean that you circumvent the Constitution and you set a precedent.
I don't know what a crisis is then.
Well, just here's the thing. A clean deal for DACA would be insanity because you're just encouraging and incentivizing illegal activity, further illegal activity on the southern border. So that is a non-starter and is just it's kind of a dumb idea, just to be honest. Secondly, we had I love you. That was Nancy Pelosi, not you.
I'm offended on her behalf.
Oh, stop. But you have 400,000 people that were apprehended along the southern border last year. I think it is fair to say that there is a crisis here in dealing with activity on the southern border. I worry for the president from a political standpoint because I think that he actually is on solid footing when he talks about law and order. And I think the conversation around immigration over the past few weeks has been illuminating in the sense that you've had Democrats just embrace lawlessness. You have Democrats that brought illegal immigrants to the State of the Union. You have Democrats like Senator Bob Menendez saying that it is not criminal to cross the border undocumented. Of course it is. You have Democrats that wanted to get rid or reduce the numbers of detention beds, forcing ICE to release criminal aliens in this country and not be able to apprehend them. So Democrats have embraced lawlessness in this country, and that's a strong argument for President Trump. But now the focus is going to be on the wall as opposed to him being able to strongly make that argument and make it clear.
Brian, let me ask you, because Andy McCarthy was on a short time ago making the point that, President Obama, when he was looking for the money to put on the pallets to give to the Iranians, he actually pulled $1.7 billion from the Judgment Fund, and that there were quieter ways to go around what was happening with Congress and find your money for this without declaring a national emergency and, begging the courts to stop you, that he could have done what President Obama did to get money when he couldn't get it out of Congress. What do you think of that?
Well, that's a very sophisticated, subtle way of doing things. I don't know if you noticed, this president doesn't really do subtle well.
No.
And he also doesn't want to have someone accusing him, what were you doing, Adam Schiff? What were you doing when you took that money and repurposed it? Why didn't you tell anybody? Instead, he's like, hey, by the way, I'm going to need that money, and here's where I'm taking it, and these are the people that I've dealt with. I would say this. All they had to do was be more reasonable in the negotiation, and there wouldn't be any need for this. But to give them 1.3 and to have all these tags to it, can't do it in Roma, can't put it in Rio Grande City. The census, they couldn't go into Salino, Texas. They got to deal with the individual mayors. You can't put a fence near the National Butterfly Park, the Lolomita Historical Park. He's looking at this, goes, it only can go in one direction, one way, and I got to get permission from all these mayors. So this is not a legitimate negotiation.
Don't you think that that's what Democrats wanted, though? They were antagonizing him into making this move so that it could be challenged.
Do you think they were thinking that far ahead?
But doesn't it also matter what that means? And Republicans created this as well, that you have three co-equal branches of government. This president is not a despot. He's not an autocrat. He has to work with Congress. That's why we send these people to Washington to ask us to check on him. So that's what he gets.
Well, what happens is part of the negotiation is saying, okay, is that what you're going to do? This is what I'm going to do. For 35 days, Nancy Pelosi wouldn't even negotiate. That was her choice. No one thought she would negotiate
at all. But Chuck Schumer gave him $1.6 billion.
Where were Democrats, the bottom line is there are cities in Mexico that have higher homicide rates per capita than in the Middle East. peace.
They don't care about butterflies.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
first of all, Democrats were silent when President Obama moved forward things with DACA, which he had said repeatedly he didn't have the authority to do. So Democrats really don't have a place to speak from here. And what I meant earlier is President Trump is much stronger talking about law and order as opposed to talking about this national emergency declaration, because the waters are muddied there in the sense that not all Republicans are with him on it. Independents might not be, and Democrats surely aren't.
And
So.
ironically, when the president was a private citizen, he tweeted how President Obama had overstepped his authority there with the executive order. So now he probably
There's always a tweet.
how for everything.
Well, yeah,
for all of
everything,
us.
everything.
Go look.
Mike Pence, too, was against
Yeah.
it.
All right, new fallout over former acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe claiming in an interview that DOJ officials were serious, not sarcastic, when they discussed possibly removing President Trump from office. Now lawmakers want McCabe to testify what it says about the department's action towards the president. Plus, Democrats divided as Amazon scraps plans to build a New York City headquarters. Some angry at the loss of thousands of new high-paying jobs. But Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and 2020 candidate Elizabeth Warren are celebrating those lost jobs, while local business owners are left to pick up the pieces.
Go down to the actual site and see what basically we're left with now. Look, I mean, just turn your cameras that way to the Ryder truck parking lot, the bombed out cars in our neighborhood. This is not Shangri-La over here. We needed this over here. We needed this.
I was flabbergasted. I said, you know, why on earth, after all the effort that we all have put in, would you simply walk away? You know, it's clear they made up their mind on their own, and if that's the way they thought they could be a part of our community, it probably wasn't going to work out anyway. If they thought they could just be an island and not a part of our city.
Yeah, good luck with the lost tax revenue. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio blasting Amazon for canceling plans to build a second headquarters in New York City with as many as 25,000 new jobs. Goodbye. The plan drew local opposition over billions in tax incentives for Amazon. Now Democrats are deeply divided over the deal's collapse. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo blaming Democratic-controlled state Senate, writing, quote, a small group of politicians put their own narrow political interests above their community, the state's economic future, and the best interests of the people in their state. The New York State Senate has done tremendous damage, and they should be held accountable for this lost economic opportunity. But Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeting, anything is possible. Today was the day a group of dedicated, everyday New Yorkers, well, politicians, and their neighbors defeated Amazon's corporate greed, its worker exploitation, and the power of the richest man in the world. And 2020 hopeful Senator Elizabeth Warren tweeting, Amazon, one of the wealthiest companies on the planet, just walked away from billions of taxpayer bribes, all because some elected officials in New York aren't sucking up to them enough. How long will we allow giant corporations to hold our democracy hostage? But some local business owners are not so happy. Take a look.
It's for business in Queens, everybody. We're closed for business here. Don't bring your big business here, because if you're too big, you get the ire of office seekers.
I know 2 days before the deal, there was an announcement that we'd get new sewers, subways. Sounded good. So without Amazon, I'm hoping the city still follows through on their promises.
Yeah, right.
Emac, I got to start with you because you're my business lady over here. So Amazon, we all buy stuff from Amazon. They make a whole bunch of money.
Right.
They're opening, creating all these jobs here. So the local government wants to take the money that they've made in the form of taxes. They let them keep it as an incentive to come here. But then these other politicians are mad because they were counting on that money from Amazon for all their little projects all over the place and all the other stuff. So they punish local New Yorkers by taking away 25,000 good jobs because they weren't going to get that tax revenue.
That's right.
Amazon was going to get to keep their hard-earned money.
Right.
Where am I going wrong?
You nailed every point. You're on it. I understand the corporate welfare debate. However, 230 cities are also bidding, saying, here, come to us, Amazon. We'll give you tax breaks. New York City was built on tax breaks. And your point's well taken. It was, as you've noted, it wasn't a $3 billion cash pile, as Alexandria Cortez. By the way, critics are saying she won 16,000 votes and she's trying to upend the economy. There wasn't a pile of cash that Amazon was taking. It was over a 10-year period that they would get the breaks if they hit job targets. And to Melissa's point, those 25,000 jobs could have been $3.75 billion in annual salaries. People paying income taxes, those workers, corporate taxes for the different Amazon affiliates, and sales taxes, and so local property taxes. So the estimated boon for the progressive wish list in revenue coming in, $27 billion was the estimate that it could have come in for the $3 billion down payment over 10 years for a tax break. So that's the math.
Doesn't it make more sense if you want to create a level playing field and you're saying Amazon, it's not fair that they're getting tax breaks and the local businesses aren't? I hear that point, and that makes sense. Isn't the answer, though, to lower taxes on the other businesses rather than either kicking Amazon out or...
Well, I mean, that's the same thing Governor Cuomo's saying with the new tax rules. Why are the blue cities paying such a price? Because they have such high taxes. But just judging by this, let's leave the tax system the way it is. The liberal mayor of New York and the liberal governor of New York combined to lure Amazon to New York City, Long Island City specifically, and they beat out 200 cities. To get a #1 draft pick, to get LeBron James or to get Mike Trout, you have to bring in and make it incentives because they're rare talents. Amazon is a company that is as good as any in the country, a great story. They were going to get $8 million worth of square feet of in Long Island City. They were going to pay for. They were going to revamp. They were going to give Plaxall pay $295,000 per square foot to take over their plant. They were going to bring in countless jobs at the average pay between $150,000 and $175,000. It's just the beginning. Amazon's going to grow. It would be an attraction for everyone to come. You have to do a lot to get a lot. This was an investment, which just shows you if the Democratic Party wants to live off this investment, this is part of that socialist attitude. I hate rich, successful people. I hate big, successful businesses. If that's what they're going to run on, they're in a lot of trouble.
They have no tax revenue. They now have no tax revenue to fund all of these, the Green New Deal and this and everything you want to do.
Well, and Cuomo already announced a budget shortfall, and we have rich people fleeing the city of New York because of high cost of living and also taxes here. I know, the taxes are abysmal living in New York City. I can attest from moving here. But it's funny because Greg Abbott, governor of Texas, tweeted out and he said, look, the left is basically, this is what you get when you push socialism, when you're hostile to business. And then he reminded everyone that Texas is #1 for business, trying to send that message out. So funny for him to get on this. But I think it's becoming increasingly clear, and I'd love to get Jess's opinion on this, that the Democrat Party is beholden to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez because she was the one that was leading the charge on this. You look at the Green Deal and look at how many 2020 presidential contenders signed up for this ridiculous pipe dream, which is the Green Deal. So the Democrat Party is beholden to her. And what's the ramifications of that?
Well, the ramifications in this moment, and it's not just her, she did have some buddies that were working on this with her, is that state senators, very powerful, obviously, that we are divided on this issue. And I think the most important reactions that I've seen are from the people who run affordable housing projects in New York, for instance, the NYCHA Housing Board. You had Congressman Gregory Meeks, who came out against this, Carolyn Maloney, people who have long represented people in this city who are saying, we wanted this. We needed this. And you're right, over 200 cities competed, and we won because of this. And I've always had difficulty with the argument that if you're running against the system, you have to do everything outside of it. And Hillary Clinton got a lot of flack for running within the system, saying, I can change things if I'm inside of it. And what's going on with the progressive movement is they're saying you can't take any corporate money, you can't work with big companies. And the truth is we do need change, but you need to be able to do that from the inside. And getting Amazon here is a way to not only create jobs, but to start a more productive national conversation about how to change the way that corporates...
Yeah, it's an interesting argument. All right, Republicans say they want answers from Andrew McCabe after the former acting FBI director reportedly said in a bombshell interview that DOJ officials talked about possibly using the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office. But McCabe now pushing back, saying his comments were taken out of context. The very latest on that next.
What actual evidence did you have that the Trump campaign was colluding with Russians? You had none. They had zero. They conspired early on in 2016 to open a counterintelligence investigation into a political campaign.
Welcome back. Well, there's growing fallout from former acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe's 60 Minutes interview promoting his new book. And McCabe's spokeswoman is now pushing back on reporting that McCabe said that he and senior Justice Department officials discussed a plan to potentially remove President Trump from office, saying no serious discussions took place and McCabe's comments were taken out of context. Now Republicans on the House and Senate Judiciary Committee are calling for McCabe to testify. They also want to hear from Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. The top Republican on House Judiciary says that McCabe's reported comments confirm Americans' worst fears about corruption at the DOJ. Listen.
This was a time in which we actually see our Department of Justice using the full force of its power to actually contemplate what could be nothing less than a coup. It's not the FBI as a whole. It goes back to this one cabal that continues to fester, and they found their time in that 8 days after Mr. Comey was fired. They said, this is our time to act.
Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge has more. Catherine, what do we need to know?
Okay, so let's start, Lisa, with late yesterday, the chairman of the powerful Senate Judiciary Committee that has direct oversight for the FBI and the Justice Department told Fox News that he would not rule out compelling testimony from the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein as well as the former FBI Director Andrew McCabe about two issues. One was any discussions about recording the president, and the second was removing him from office under the 25th Amendment.
I mean, you're having a conversation about whether or not you're going to invoke the 25th Amendment. So I would imagine if the shoe were on the other foot, my Democratic colleagues would want to know about that conversation if it involved a Democrat.
I want to go back to the statement that we have just received from a spokesperson for the former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. And as I read it, I want you to listen and pay attention closely to the language because it's very limiting, but acknowledges that there may have been some discussions about these issues. It states, certain statements by Mr. McCabe in interviews associated with the release of his book have been taken out of context and misrepresented. To clarify, at no time did Mr. McCabe participate in any, this is the key word, extended discussions about the use of the 25th Amendment, nor is he aware of any such discussions. He was present and participated in a discussion that included a comment by Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein regarding the 25th Amendment. This anecdote was not included in his book. Now, if you've been following our reporting here at Fox News, this is really important because the FBI's former general counsel, that's the FBI's top lawyer, James Baker, testified under oath last fall. So that's a threat of perjury if he lies, that he had heard directly from Andrew McCabe and FBI lawyer Lisa Page about conversations they said they had with the Deputy Attorney General covering both of these issues, the 25th Amendment and recording or wearing a wire with the president. So we've got these sort of parsed statements from McCabe, and then we also have this under oath testimony from the FBI's top lawyer that conflicts with what they've issued today, Lisa.
Thank you, Catherine.
You're welcome.
Brian, I'm going to start with you. Where are we now on this? Where does this leave us? You have this article from the New York Times. Now you've got McCabe's spokeswoman kind of clarifying, kind of not. You also have James Baker under oath. So where does this leave?
I can just go by with the excerpts I've seen from CBS and the coverage I've seen in the New York Times. But I will say this. It's easy to say Donald Trump says this and the FBI says that, or James Comey. They have a problem with each other. Rosenstein says one thing, Comey says one thing, and McCabe says another. They all can't be lying. They all can't be telling the truth because they diverge. Number two is, keep in mind, this is a guy that came out and was told by the FBI you weren't telling the truth, so therefore we're going to let you go. And when the IG looked at what McCabe did, they gave him a criminal referral. And days before he was about to get his pension and retire, they fired him. So that's the mindset of somebody who has to keep that in mind when you're reading his account of what happened.
Melissa, what should Congress do next? I know Senator Graham said that he might compel them to testify both McCabe and Rosenstein. Does that need to happen, and what questions need to be asked?
I mean, nothing ever comes of that. So I hate that route when they go. I understand why they want to do it, but nothing ever comes of that. No one ever gets punished. What's interesting to me about this is, so you heard in that statement from the spokesperson, they said the anecdote isn't in the book, that this is something he's just saying as he's going out and doing interviews about the book. This isn't the first time that we've heard this, and the New York Times is corroborating it as well, saying that he also said it to us. He said to CBS that they sat there and they had this serious conversation conversation about removing the president, wearing a wire, nobody was kidding. And then he said it to CBS, he said it to the New York Times. The clarification there, she says they didn't have an extended conversation. What does that mean? So they just briefly talked about doing this. I think that what is terrifying about this to the rest of America who's paying attention is that you seem to have this ruling class in Washington who has a grip on power, whether they are politicians, whether they are political figures in the top of these different departments, even in some cases journalists, people who are invested in the power that they have in Washington. And President Trump has upended that power they've carved for themselves, and he's threatened it. And I think that that's driving a bunch of people to do crazy things like potentially this.
Well, Liz, what do you make of what Melissa just said?
It's important because the FBI itself does not have a role in applying the 25th Amendment. But it's clear that FBI officials apparently reportedly took it upon themselves. The New York Times has access to a memo involving Andrew McCabe saying, quote, yes, we did discuss the president's capacity and his removal from office under the 25th Amendment. I know in just working, I've been a business journalist for 30 years. I have FBI sources. They tell me they don't like the power structure inside the FBI in D.C., that they appear to be a law unto themselves, where the field offices have problems in rendering what their job is supposed to be, dealing with that kind of construct.
Well, Jess, I want to make sure you get in here as well. So we've got James Baker under oath. You've got Peter Strzok talking about insurance policies and text messages, obviously a very clear bias towards the president. Then you also have the Senate Intel Committee recently saying that they don't see any evidence of collusion. Are President Trump's criticisms of the Russia investigation correct? Is there any fairness to that, considering taking the totality of all this information?
I think that we have to be consistent here, that until Bob Mueller publishes his report, we don't know what happened here.
So what would it have to say, though? Let me be devil's advocate. What would that report have to say to justify them wanting to wear a wire and trap him? Would it have to say that he himself colluded with Putin and he's a puppet of Putin?
And I heard that over the weekend after Senator Richard Burr made his comment, on Sunny Hostin on The View, said, do we need a call from Vladimir Putin to President Trump saying, hey, I got your back?
I didn't see that.
Well, yeah. I caught it, and it was widely disseminated. And there are definitely different gradations of collusion that would satisfy people, and that's why I leave it up to Bob Mueller to tell us what this is. But I just want to make a more general point that all of this happens because people are writing books when they shouldn't be writing books.
Well,
if you just left, you were just ahead of the FBI, take a breather. I mean, if people are in your text messages because you were having an affair, don't write a book. Just take a moment. All
right, well,
I love it. Except for Omarosa, that was perfect.
But I didn't even love her book.
But we do need to get to the bottom of this because I think for a lot of Americans it's very disturbing. Well, but there are new signs that former Vice President Joe Biden is all but certain to make a 2020 run, joining a very crowded field. This is former Massachusetts Governor Bill Weld is announcing that he may challenge President Trump in a Republican primary. So what to make of all of this ahead of 2020? We're going to debate it. Stay with us.
Former VP Joe Biden appears to be moving closer to a 2020 White House bid. A source telling Fox News that Biden is almost certain to run and is reaching out to former colleagues on Capitol Hill, along with activists and donors. All this as a Fox News poll finds 55% believe Democrats' chances of beating President Trump in 2020 are either excellent or good. Meantime, former Massachusetts Governor Bill Weld announcing today he is exploring a Republican primary challenge to President Trump in 2020. Take a listen.
Our president is simply too unstable to carry out the duties of the highest executive office in the land. The lights are on in the White House, but no one's at home.
And a Fox News poll finds 15% of Trump voters would rather see someone else as the Republican 2020 nominee. Okay, so we've been talking for a while about who is the Republican that's going to get in here for the challenge. Do you expect it to be Weld, or you see John Kasich soon?
Yeah, no, Weld has got a lot of momentum, especially as the running mate for Johnson last time. I'm being sarcastic. There's nothing there's nothing more that would make less noise than Bill Weld deciding to run against the President of the United States. Would mean, I don't even know if it means the President has to show up anywhere. You don't have to cover the results. I am, for a president that is so unorthodox as this president, knowing that George W. Bush, H.W. Bush had a challenge, and remember that Jimmy Carter had a big challenge. I thought for sure there would be people, high-profile people going after him. I'm not sure the window's been closed yet, but I don't think he's worried about Bill Weld.
Melissa, do you think he's worried about anyone, and who might that anyone be?
On the Republican side?
Yeah.
No, I don't think. I mean, no. That's like.
Do you think
that's
he's
kind of a
worried about
non-starter.
Biden or Kamala or?
Well, personally, I'm not inside his head, so I have no idea. I would imagine
Scary
he's
place
not
to be, I'm
actually worried about anyone, but I would say that in my mind, Joe Biden's the biggest threat.